about Martin Sellner, Brittany Pettibone and Lauren Southern being banned from entering the UK. And I want to start off by saying that I am appalled that these people have been banned from entering the UK. I completely and unequivocally support their rights to freedom of speech and freedom of association. These aren't criminals, terrorists, or drug dealers, they are political activists. But there's something that bothers me about this case, and it bothers me just as much as the aforementioned activists being denied entry into the UK bothers me. And that's seeing a sickening double standard emerging over this banning. Because I'm seeing a lot of people crawling out of the woodwork and acting as if this treatment is unheard of, as if it's something new, something that is unprecedented. And let me assure you, it's not. In fact, I don't have to assure you. It would only take a quick Google search to find out that plenty of other political activists have been banned from entering the UK in the past. The UK has never had a good record on freedom of speech. In fact, the UK has had a long and shameful history of restricting free speech, freedom of association, and barring individuals from entering the country for ideological reasons. In fact, here are the names of some other nationalists or patriots who were banned from entering the UK. Richard Spencer, Don Black, David Duke, Pamela Geller, Geert Wilders, although his ban was overturned on appeal, Michael Savage, and even George Lincoln Rockwell. Now, Rockwell was banned from entering the UK back in 1962. And it's not just the UK's shameful restrictions on entry that should have patriots up in arms. Let's not forget that just last week, Paul Golding and Jada Franson, the leaders of Britain First, were dragged off to jail to serve 18 weeks and 36 weeks respectively for protesting against Muslim grooming gangs. And Paul and Jada aren't the only patriotic political activists who have spent time in jail or been arrested over the years. Members of the National Front, the British National Party, the English Defence League, and numerous other groups have all been harassed and persecuted as well. Members of UKIP have been investigated, and 2 members of UKIP even had their foster children taken away as social services deemed their political beliefs to be unhealthy. Other notable political activists, commentators, and leaders have also all either been arrested or ended up with criminal records. Tommy Robinson, Nick Griffin, and the late John Tyndall are all examples of this. And whilst we're at it, let's not forget when I was taken to court on 8 counts of incitement to racial hatred for making political speeches against Muslim grooming gangs in the run-up to the European election in 2004, and these speeches were made at private meetings. So yes, for campaigning about Muslim grooming gangs and asking people to vote for a political party that pledged to deal with the issue, I faced 8 counts of incitement to racial hatred, and I was found not guilty on all 8. But it's not just individuals that have been persecuted. Last year, the British state banned 3 far-right organisations and listed them as terrorist groups. The first and most notable was National Action, the other 2 being Scottish Dawn and NS131, which emerged after the banning of National Action. Now, don't mistake this as my support for those groups. I don't support those groups. I had a long history of opposing the tactics National Action used and publicly criticised them for their behaviour, which I felt wasn't conducive to our cause. But saying that, placing National Action, Scottish Dawn and NS131 on a list with the IRA, Al-Qaeda and ISIS is so ridiculous that any educated person can see the absurdity of that situation. None of the 3 far-right groups banned in the UK ever committed a single terrorist act, yet they are on a list with groups that killed thousands of people and collectively carried out some of the worst terrorist atrocities the world has ever seen. So it's pretty clear to see that the British state has a long history of persecuting patriots and demonising nationalism. And that really is something we should all be talking about. Something that should be highlighted. In fact, it's something that people should be up in arms about. But for too long, people have been silent over this kind of treatment. And what makes me just as sick as seeing Brittany, Martin and Lauren being banned from the UK is seeing all the people who thought it was okay for Richard Spencer to be banned from the UK now feigning some kind of righteous outrage. Well, there's either freedom, and that obviously includes free speech and freedom of association, or there's not freedom. And one of the reasons we are in this horrible mess is because so many people who claim to be fighting for freedom are simply so scared about being called racist and so bothered about keeping up appearances, so bothered about so-called optics and trying to ensure that they are still just establishment friendly enough to get on the television, that they are terrified to say anything when anyone to the right of them gets banned or has their freedom of speech restricted. And these people said nothing when the likes of Richard Spencer were stopped from coming into the UK. These people said nothing when groups like National Action were banned. And these people sat quietly, staring at their toes when nationalists were thrown into jail for defending themselves from left-wing thugs. In fact, worse still, some of the people who are now feigning outrage attacked the likes of Richard Spencer. They attacked groups to the right of them or condemned those who were bold enough to talk about certain taboo issues. But now it's Brittany Pettibone and Martin Sellner and Lauren Southern. These people are crying their eyes out. Well, here's the first bit of the harsh reality of this situation. All those who said nothing or did nothing when Richard Spencer was banned from entering the UK, or those who actually had a smug grin on their face and used such bannings to distance themselves from the scary far right, they are part of the problem. They helped set the precedent for these bannings through their silent compliance, or worse still, through their smug virtue signalling as they tried to score points with the liberal media by happily claiming that previous bans were actually good calls. Well, if you were one of those people and you are now crying over these latest bans, dry your eyes, because your cowardice is part of what has led to this. Because that's how all this has worked. The British state has slowly eroded the freedom of everyone who is a nationalist, a patriot, or even simply holds anti-immigration views. And the British state has done so by slowly turning up the heat, just as if they were boiling a frog. They haven't thrown the frog straight into the pan of boiling water. They just slowly turned up the gas, and the frog sat there smiling as it was slowly cooked. And all this will continue, and all this will only get worse. This isn't the end by a long way. The British state will continue its crackdown, and we will see more people harassed, more people banned from entering the UK, more organisations banned, more individuals prosecuted, unless we do something. And when I say do something, I don't mean online petitions. I don't mean trying to get things trending on Twitter. I don't mean writing letters to your MP. The only way we are ever going to change the way the government works and ensure that the government doesn't take our rights away and curtail our freedoms is if we become the government. Anyone out there who still thinks that the politicians sat in Westminster can be reasoned with, that they can be made to see sense, is so naive and foolish it's unreal. In fact, anyone who thinks that we can actually reason with these politicians and that they can be forced to do the right thing is actually of no use to this movement whatsoever. Because essentially, those naive people are still endorsing the system and the very people who have been placed above us and that are conspiring to destroy us. There is only one solution, and that is replacing the politicians. We need to build a power-winning machine that can actually challenge these people, that can actually ensure that we win power, that can make it so all these politicians that are in the pay of the internationalists are thrown out of Parliament. The sheep can't expect the owners of the slaughterhouse to act in their interest. And it doesn't matter how loud they cry out, how much noise they make, their fate is sealed. And the same is true for us. It's not about making a noise or signing a petition or having a march. It's about removing those from power who are trying to do away with our rights and ultimately who are trying to replace us. Until we take the power back, we are still in exactly the same position with exactly the same people ruling over us. Remember the big march that the Football Lads Alliance had in London. They claimed 60,000 people attended. And let's roll with that figure, because 60,000 people is a hell of a lot of people. But when all the chanting was over, when all the beer bottles were empty, when the streets were again silent, nothing had changed. Not one thing. Because for all that show of force and bravado, not one politician was removed from a single seat. And if we want to change things, if we want to ensure we have freedom, we have to come together. We have to get something started, something that can win real world power, something that can remove the politicians from the seat of power. We have to start an organisation that will put us in the positions of power. And whether people like it or not, the only way to do that is by getting involved in real politics and taking the power back ourselves. Because if we want a future for our people, we can't leave that future in the hands of those who hate us. We need to take our destiny in our own hands. We can't sit around hoping someone else is going to grant our people a future. We have to create that future ourselves. And that might be hard work. It might be a long and tiring struggle. But what are the other options? To sit complaining on Facebook as our rights and liberties are taken away? But remember this, nothing that was ever really worth having came easy. And nothing is worth more than securing a future for our people.